What is up, YouTube? Dottz Gaming here, and today I'm bringing you guys the third episode of the ESO Fireside Chat podcast, and that is on Theorycrafting. I've been getting bombarded with questions about how I Theorycraft, how I personally go about thinking up builds, so I figured it was appropriate for the next episode of the Fireside Chat podcast to be on this topic. As you can see, I do not have the normal screen up, so I will be putting, my website where I have the builds written out that I'm going to be explaining the Theorycrafting process behind on the screen, so you can look through these. You can look at the screen while I'm going through them and kind of follow along and have something to watch while I talk, but you will still get the same experience if you choose to not watch the video and just listen. Now, being that this is a video about builds, just a disclaimer, this is my opinion. This is how I plan to build my character. If you don't like it, that's fine. It's a build. It's a personal thing, and everyone's got their own opinions. Everyone plays a certain way. Just because a build might be better for you doesn't mean it's better for me or someone else. Personal play style, personal flavor, and just personal taste comes into it. So just keep that stuff in mind, especially when I'm discussing the PvP build. If you have, if you think that my PvP build's bad, that's fine. Maybe it's bad for you, but it's great for me. So just keep that in mind when you're watching this. I know a lot of times build videos get, people all rubbed the wrong way, but especially this is a video about build making, so some people might get super triggered, but I just want to put that little disclaimer beforehand. But I'm going to start with the Magical Warden build. I'm going to go through the whole build and how I went about personally theorycrafting it. Now, Magical Warden, Stamina Templar. Have not played either class. So this will really be a true representation of what I do going into a class that I have never, ever played or touched before. I'm actually going to move that over there real quick. So, moving into it, we have the introduction. I knew that I wanted this build to be usable in a variety of new player PvE environments. And what are those most commonly? Dungeons and general solo PvE, or even with a small group. That is what most new players are doing. And yes, I consider new players even up into the lower parts of the CP, even a couple hundred CP. You're still a new player. And primarily, that is what newer players are doing. They are doing dungeons and solo PvE. So I wanted to make a build for my girlfriend, who is going to be piloting this build, that would work for her in those two instances. Be effective in a dungeon environment and also still be effective in a solo PvE environment, or just with a small group of me and her. She's not going to be the best in either instance. I'm trying to find a compromise between both two playstyles, but she'll be solid all around, and I think that that's the best way to go about it for this instance. Now, this build has not been theorycrafted or put on any characters yet, so obviously some of the enchants that I have here might need some tuning, but overall I think the build's in a really, really solid spot. Now, the setup itself, what I do when I start creating a build and I start theorycrafting a build is I will either start with my gear or my abilities. Usually, like with my DK build, for example, I knew I wanted, like my DK PvP build, I knew I wanted to use a destruction staff for my back bar for elemental drain. So I built around having a staff on the back bar and losing my 5-piece on my back bar. In this case, I knew I wanted to use the Eternal Guardian. I 100% knew that was a skill that I wanted to use. So I chose my gear around having a constant pet. And so obviously we go with the Cropidance. You start off with Necro. It's a great set. Gives us a lot of Magicka, a lot of good stats. Gives us 3 lines of max Magicka, and while you have a pet active, you get even more max Magicka. So that is obviously why we chose Necropidance. Now, I had a choice. Do I go with a second 5-piece and a 1-piece monster set, or do I go with a 2-piece monster set, and do I go with 4 pieces of a different set? Now, the reason I personally chose to go with another 5-piece set and a 1-piece is because for the build that I was trying to make, none of these 1-pieces really seemed to fit the vision of what I was trying to accomplish. Like none of these 2-piece monster sets really fit what I wanted the build to do and accomplish. And after looking through them, I was just like meh on a lot of the monster sets with how I wanted the build to play. Being very pet centric, being very general for both group and solo content. So I didn't feel personally that any of the monster sets really fit the bill the way I wanted them to. So I decided instead to go with Julianos, because everyone knows I love Julianos. It's such a good set. Gives 2 lines of spell critical, a line of max magica, and then a line of spell damage. And I figured, you know what? Because we're beginning to stack the spell critical, let me add a 1-piece Ice Heart. Ice Heart also plays into the theme of the Magical Warden, and I know Lauren really likes the frost aspect, so, you know, maybe getting the Ice Heart shoulders is going to be a really cool way to make the character feel thematically like a Magical Warden. And like I said, just getting that 1 piece of spell critical really plays into the 2 lines we also get from Julianos and the fact that she's going to be wearing 5 pieces of light. So we can focus. I started to think, okay, if we stack up the spell critical, we could stack up the Elfborn CP, and we could really focus on some decent crit damage and, you know, help use that as a vehicle for her damage. Now, because this was a PvE build, we of course are going to go flat divines. Whenever I also figured, because I know she's playing a Nord, that is the character she wants to play. That is the race that she likes the most. And while some people are going, Nord is an Abyss Magica race, meh, you can make it work. You can make the race work. You just need to tailor the enchants and the CP around the racial passive choices. You can't afford to maybe put points other places that you would, because you have your racial passives to lean on. So I had to, you know, go very aggressive with my max magica enchants, being that we are playing a Nord. Now, of course, I'm going to be running a 5-1-1 once we eventually get the Undaunted passives, and being that we are playing a max stat build with Necropotence, getting the 5-1-1 setup to get that extra 6% max stats is going to give us a crap ton of damage. If I was not running Necropotence, I might be a little less inclined to go 5-1-1. But because we are running Necro and we are playing a really high max stat build, this is going to give us a shit ton of damage. It's going to benefit us a lot. So always go straight Divines. That is just a PvE standard. All Magica. We're going to go Arcane for the Jewellery, of course. And I'm projecting that we're going to do 1 line of spell damage, 1 line of max magica, and then either spell damage or magica recovery. I meant magica recovery here, spell damage here. So that's 1 jewelry piece, spell damage, 1 magica recovery, and then for the 3rd jewelry piece, I'm not sure if we're going to go spell damage or magica recovery. It's going to depend on how the stat sheet kind of falls when the build itself is made and how she's playing it and what she feels she needs. But really, I feel like, based on your playstyle, either, enchant will work fine here. In terms of our staves, we're going to be using a fire staff on the front bar that is infused with flame damage, and a lightning staff on the back bar that is Nirnhoned with spell damage. That's just usually the most common combination for PvE staves. I've known that from looking at other builds, so I was just like, this is what we're going to go with for this. In terms of a beginner setup, I put this on because I always have this on my website. 5-piece Julianos, 3-piece Willpower, and then 3-piece Seducer, basically following the exact same layout in terms of traits and enchants as the first setup did. So, it had all Divines, all Max Magica, 2 spell damage, 1 Magica recovery, infused front bar staff, Nirnhoned back bar staff, a flame enchant on the front bar, and a spell damage enchant on the back bar. Now, I put this little note here because I know I've experienced this with a lot of new players I've talked to, and Lauren is included in this. A lot of new players really like to stick to the theme of their classes as closely as possible. Meaning, honestly, that I know Lauren wanted to use Frost Staves. She was like, I'm playing a character that uses Frost Magic. I don't want to use a Flame Staff. I want to use 2 Frost Staves. And and I told her, you know what? You could probably do that. Are you going to lose damage on your front and back bar? Of course you are. We all know that we're not going to benefit from the Destruction Staff passes that give us more AoE and more single target damage on our front and back bar. But you're going to gain some survivability in your return. You're going to have, because you have a very high magica pool and your block cost magica, you will be able to reliably block. You're going to gain a damage shield on heavy attacks. So I figured, you know what? If she wants to use Frost Staves, we could also put some points into block cost reduction as a way for her to even gain some more survivability. So like I said, I tried to tailor the build around what I knew she wanted to use. Obviously, like I said, if we're trying to be optimal, you want to go Fire Lightning, but I know she's going to be playing Double Frost, so I tried to tailor the CP a little bit to that. Now, in terms of our attributes, we're going to put points into health until we reach about 17k health, and then we're going to put the rest into max magic, because 17k is just a golden number for PvE content with veteran dungeons. It'll prevent you from getting one-shot by most mechanics, so that's generally what you want to aim for. Now, like I said, in terms of the ability bars, like I said, I knew I wanted to build around Eternal Guardian, so that's how I got my gear set up. But then, in terms of the rest of the skills, I had to build in a way that I thought would be conducive to a new player. The one thing that I have noticed from dealing with newer players is that they struggle so much with a rotation. I'm going to go over my ability choices now and explain why I chose them, but I'm going to go over the rotation later on in the podcast and in the video. So I wanted to make 2 separate bars with an easy delineation between what their bars' purposes are, so that the new player, in this case Lauren, would understand we're on our front bar for damage, we're on our back bar for buffs and survivability. You don't have to think, this is my damage bar, this is my survival bar. Easy delineation. So, of course, going through the class abilities, I knew I was going to use Screaming Cliff Racer. It is the Warden spammable. It is such a good ability. I knew that that was going to be my spammable for the build. Same thing with Deep Fissure. That was going to combo well. While we're waiting for our Deep Fissure to pop off, we're going to be using our Cliff Racers. It's just a staple Magical Warden ability. You know, it's the Morph of Scorch. It's just a very staple Magical Warden ability. Now, we have those 2 for our single target, and I knew the next abilities I wanted to focus on some really good AoE pressure. You know, we have the Bear for some single target, we have Screaming Cliff Racer, we have Deep Fissure. I need some AoE pressure in the build. So I looked through Winter's Embrace and saw that Impaling Shards would be a very, very nice AoE skill, and that morphs into Winter's Revenge. And that deals frost damage in an area over a period of time, reduces movement speed, and scales off your max magic goods. Just a nice AoE ability. So I was like, we're going to smack that on there. Gives us a Winter's Revenge skill as well. So that'll help even out the bar and start giving us some AoE pressure. Now, I knew for my next ability, I wanted to use Swarm. It's another dot that plays into the build. But I know the typical morph is Fetcher Infection, where every other cast deals 75% increased damage. But that turns this into a single target attack. And I was thinking from a general questing perspective, it might be a bit easier and it might be a little more intuitive to have this be an AoE ability, so that if you're being attacked by multiple monsters, you will be able to take them down. So I chose to use Growing Swarm. So once the original dot ends on your first target, the Fetcher Flies are going to infect up to 6 new targets within 10 meters, and is going to give you massive AoE dot pressure that is going to just start taking stuff down. It's going to start killing things. So I thought that that would be a really neat thing to try. If she doesn't like it, or we find it doesn't work well, I can always go back to Fetcher Infection. But as a way to make this another AoE ability and really mow down packs while we are PvEing and make sure that, you know, if we do get overrun, that these enemies are going to be taking damage, I thought Growing Swarm might be an interesting ability to try. And that's the good thing about Theorycrafting. If you find out and you test something that you think is interesting and you don't like it, you could always go back on it. A lot of people think that when they're Theorycrafting, like, this is what I thought up. This is what I must use. But it's not. If you think, just because something sounds like a good idea on paper, you might put it into practice and think and realize this sucks. Or you might think something is bad on paper, but then when you give it a chance in a practical situation, you might find that it's very, very good and that it actually shattered your expectations. So I was like, you know what? I think Growing Swarm could be a very interesting interaction, so I want to try to have her use it. And then, of course, we're going with Elemental Blockade for having a Destruction Staff ability on our front damage bar. And plus, it's a staple AoE ability in any Magicka character's build. And then, of course, like I said, we are going to be using the Eternal Guardian for our ultimate. That is what I wanted to put the build around. Now, in terms of our back bar, I knew that I wanted the back bar, like I said, buffs and healing. That's what I wanted it for. So obviously, we're playing a Magicka build. We need a source of major sorcery. For those of you who do not know, major sorcery increases your spell damage by 20%. You need to have a source of major sorcery somewhere in your build if you're playing Magicka. If you're playing Stamina, you need a source of major brutality. If you do not have a source of one of these major buffs, your damage is severely gimped. It needs to come from potions or an ability, because Blue Betty is such a great skill, removing a negative effect when activated and restoring Magicka and giving major sorcery. It was a very obvious choice. And also, you know, it just frickin' doesn't cost anything, which is just another awesome bonus to this skill. Then we have Ice Fortress. I decided to go with Ice Fortress as a way to not only offer some group utility, if you're playing in a group, whether it be a dungeon group or a small group, but this makes you a lot more survivable by giving you major resolve, major ward, and minor protection. You know, this is going to be a really, really good way to make sure that when you're playing solo out in the world, you're able to live and you're able to survive. And like I said, in a group instance, this brings some utility. This brings some group utility. So this is something I liked as a back bar ability. It lasts a really long time. Blue Betty lasts 24 seconds and Ice Fortress lasts 21 seconds. So it seemed like a very easy choice for me. It's a very strong buff. Lasts a very long time. Definitely going to use it. Then we also have Lotus Blossom. The reason I chose to use Lotus Blossom is due to the fact that you gain Major Prophecy, increasing your spell critical. You also cause your light attacks to restore health and your heavy attacks to restore health to you or nearby ally within 12 meters for 20 seconds. Awesome skill. Gives you a major buff. Gives you some health back. I chose to pick this up, you know, another buff. Enchanted Growth. I chose to use Enchanted Growth for a heal. We're a new player. We're looking for a build that's going to be trying to solo. I need a reliable heal. Enchanted Growth is great. Also gives minor intellect and minor endurance to allies. Of course, Harness Magicka for a shield. Staple shield in any Magicka build. And then, again, Eternal Guardian on the back bar to maintain our pet on both bars. So basically, I would look through all of the different trees, Animal Companions, Winter's Embrace, and Green Balance, and I looked at the abilities and was like, do I think this has a place? You know, do I really think this has a place? Like Nature's Grasp. Swing up to 22 meters to a targeted ally, healing them. Like, no, that's not going to have a place with what I'm trying to accomplish with my build. That doesn't have a place. You need to think when you're making a build, when you're looking at your ability selection, what am I trying to accomplish? What am I gonna need when I'm out in the world playing? What do I feel that I'm going to need? And try to, you know, build your ability selection around that. I thought, I'm going to need to be able to survive. I'm going to need to be able to give myself a lot of good buffs, need some self-healing, a shield, and be able to deal decent damage. And this build accomplishes that through my ability choices. I'm actually going to skip to the rotation section really fast, because how I ordered this build, how I ordered the abilities, plays exactly into the rotation, and this feels like a perfect place to talk about it. I'm going to start on my back bar. This build starts on the back bar. Blue Betty lasts 24 seconds. Ice Fortress lasts 21 seconds. Lotus Blossom lasts for 20 seconds. So, Blue Betty, Ice Fortress, Lotus Blossom. I use those right in a row. That way, they'll all begin to expire around the same time. If I use Lotus Blossom first, Ice Fortress second, and Blue Betty third, Lotus Blossom is going to expire way before Blue Betty ever does. So I'm going to either be losing uptime on Lotus Blossom, or I'm going to be overlapping Blue Betty casts. So I put Blue Betty first, 24 seconds, Ice Fortress second, 21 seconds, and Lotus Blossom third, 20 seconds. So I cast Blue Betty, light attack, Ice Fortress, light attack, Lotus Blossom, light attack, swap. Then, so that's easy, 1, 2, 3. Then on my back bar, I chose to go, my front bar, excuse me, I looked, Winter's Revenge lasts 12 seconds, Growing Swarm lasts 10 seconds, Elemental Blockade lasts 8 seconds. So I chose to do Winter's Revenge, light attack, Growing Swarm, light attack, Elemental Blockade, light attack, so that they would all end at about the same time, would be refreshed, would not lose uptime, and would not overlap my casts. Then I would just use my spammables with Shock and with Screaming Cliff Racer and Deep Fissure, refresh my 3 dots on the front bar when I need to, use Screaming Cliff Racer and Deep Fissure, and then start the entire rotation over again and refresh everything. So you see how easy that is? 1, 2, 3, bar swap, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, start over. A lot of times people will be like, Dottz, I can't remember my rotation. I don't know how to do a rotation. What am I supposed to do? Put your abilities in an order descending cast time, descending duration, I believe, is what you're supposed to do. So 24 seconds, then 21 seconds, then 20 seconds. I cast it in that order, but I also put it in an order that makes sense. I don't do like 1, 5, 2, 1, 5, 2. Like I did 1, 2, 3. So that it's easy for me in the heat of the moment to remember what I'm supposed to do, what I'm supposed to click, and what I'm supposed to cast. So that is basically the theorized rotation and how I'm going to do the skills. Now, in terms of, I'll do CP last. In terms of buff food, I decided to go with the Witch Mother's Potent Brew, mainly because we are playing in Nord. I know Lauren to be playing in Nord, so I want that extra Magicka recovery from Witch Mothers, and plus Witch Mothers is just such a great food. I love it. So it seems like such a great and obvious choice for PvE. I also decided, since we are going full Divines and Apprentice is the highest parsing Mundus, and we already have such a high Magicka pool already, to just throw on the Apprenticed Mundus for increased spell damage, which will give us the most damage. Like I said, these are the race choices, but we're obviously going to be playing Nord. You know, you got to look at your, you know, are you playing, like, I've gone over race so many times with you guys. You all should know by now. High Elf is going to be the best for this build. Dark Elf will probably be second. Brett will be third. And then obviously I threw up Nord on number 4 because that is what Lauren's playing. So I wanted to give a nod to the Nord. And then for potions, because we get Major Sorcery from our build, we do not need Major Sorcery pots. If we were playing optimally, we would try to get potions that give increase to spell damage. Increase to spell critical and critical hit damage. But you know, this is a new player build. It doesn't really matter. We're just going to go with any Magicka Restoration potions. Obviously, for passives, we need all of our class passives, the light armor passives, the heavy and medium armor passives that don't require us to wear 5 pieces, all the Destruction Staff passives. We are going to be playing a vampire, so you need the relevant vampire passives, Undaunted, all of our racials, Banished to Wicked from the Fighters Guild, and Medicinal Use from Alchemy. Now, some of you might be wondering, why did I choose not to use any Mages Guild abilities? And that is mainly because I felt that for the way I wanted the build to play, that Inner Light did not have a place. I couldn't look at what I wanted to accomplish with this build and fit Inner Light in. You need to remember, the goal of this build was not to be some sort of super high optimal, you know, DPS max parse pushing build. You know, this is to be a good compromise between solo and dungeon play. And I didn't feel that Inner Light really had a place anywhere. It would be great with Necropotence, don't get me wrong, would give us a crap ton of damage. For how I wanted the build to play for her, I didn't feel that Inner Light had a place. So we are just not going to use it. If you do decide, Dottz, you're an idiot, use Inner Light, then if you want to try this build out, throw Inner Light somewhere. But for how I wanted to accomplish it, I did not think that Inner Light really had a place. And then, in terms of CP, with CP, I am not the world's greatest at PvE CP theorizing. I'm good at my PvP CP. PvE, what I would say is throw on pretty much any CP and then use the Constellations add-on to really optimize it. But This is what I theory crafted a bit. It could be complete shit. It could be good. I don't know. But from what I do know about PvE, I think this is pretty good. We're going 44 into Elfborn. I'm choosing to go that high into Elfborn due to the fact that we are playing a lot of crit chance. So having high crit damage, I think, is going to give us a lot of DPS. We're going to go 49 into Elemental Expert. Elemental Expert's a really good start. I don't like to go above 56. I do not like to go above 56. So I think 49 is going to be a good amount, though, for where I want to put the rest of the CP. I put 39 as Spell Erosion because that's just kind of like what I was left with. I was left with 39. I wanted to go, I knew, somewhere between 25 to 40. I just wasn't sure exactly how much, but 39 is kind of where, with all the jump points and everything, where it all ended up. If you don't like how little I have in Elemental Expert, if you think 56 is better, pop some out of Spell Erosion and put it into Elemental Expert. So I went with 23 into Master at Arms. I know Master at Arms is generally more used as a PvP star, but I still really like it for PvE, so I just threw 23 points into Master at Arms to get use out of it. And then, of course, we have to go 75 into Thaumaturge to make use out of Off Balance in all of the group play. You know, because we get, with 75 points into Thaumaturge, we get Exploiter from the Ritual tree. We get the Exploiter, which gives us 10% more damage to off-balance targets. So with off-balance being such a prominent status effect in the game, I knew that we had to grab Exploiter. Then for the Thief trees, I went 44 points into Warlord. It's just kind of what I had, so I wanted to get some of course, some dodge, some CC break reduction there. I went 100 points into Arcanist because we are playing a Nord. We don't have the same recovery that a High Elf is going to have, so I need to get all of the recovery I could possibly get. Also 48 into Tenacity to make our heavy attacks restore more resources, and then 38 into Shadow Ward, like I said. You know, because I know Lauren's going to want to use a Frost Staff, I want to give her some ability to be able to have some block cost reduction. But even if you don't use the Frost Staffs like I know she's going to use, you can still find use out of Shadow Ward, just due to the fact that you know, you're going to need to block some key mechanics, and you will find yourself needing to block from time to time. So having this reduction here is nice. If you don't want Shadow Ward, you can throw it into Tumbling and choose to dodge roll, but I chose to go with Shadow Ward here. Then for our red trees, I went 40 into Ironclad, 43 into Elemental Defender and Hardy. I go higher in these in PvE than I do in PvP. I think it is a bit better. 48 into Thick Skinned because, you know, there's plenty of dots in PvE environment. So I want to be able to make sure that I don't take as much damage from those. And then I decided to go 21 into Light Armor Focus because we're going to be using 5 pieces of light armor. I want to make sure that when we're out in the world, or when we are in a trial, or not a trials, excuse me, when we're in a dungeon environment, that any physical damage is dealing less damage to me. So beefing up our physical resistance a little bit, I feel like, is a pretty nice thing. And then I also went 35 into Spell Shield to further buff up our spell resistance, because I know that a lot of times you generally face more Magicka damage, excuse me, than you do physical damage. So at least from what I looked at from other builds, most didn't have any points in a Light Armor Focus. They put all their points in a Spell Shield. I figured that for a new player wearing a 5 pieces of light armor build, I want to try to get some more a bit of more evenness, if you know what I'm trying to say, on my mitigations. So I wanted to dump some points. Like, obviously Spell Shield's still going to be higher, or spell resistance is still going to be higher with the 35 points in a Spell Shield and 21 points in a Light Armor Focus and wearing light armor, but I felt that for me this was something I wanted to give it a try. So that is pretty much it for the Magicka Warden PvE build. I think the PvP build is going to take a lot less time to explain because I don't have to go over rotation. But that's the PvE build. That is how I decided to build and form the PvE build. So yeah, if you are choosing to listen to this video and you want to, if you didn't get the full experience from listening to the video, you can feel free to watch it and you will be able to see everything that I'm highlighting over. And you'll be able to get really the full experience of everything. So we are moving now into the PvP build, my Stamina Templar PvP build that I theorycrafted for myself. Now I know, remember guys, it's a PvP build. PvP builds are personal. Just keep that in mind when I'm going through this. I also have no experience playing Stamina. I have no experience playing Templar. But I'm honestly pretty confident with this. I ran it by a bunch of people that I know who I know have a lot of experience with just Stamina in general and Templar, and they said that it was a very, very good build and a very solid start, especially for someone who's never played either. So I think the build's overall in a great spot to start with. It is going to be a 5 heavy, 2 medium setup. I knew immediately right off the bat I'm wearing heavy armor. I am not wearing medium armor. It is not happening. So I needed, that's how I started this build. I started this build going, I'm wearing heavy armor. So what can I do? And how can I play this build to utilize heavy armor? So I had to think about that. Okay, I'm using heavy armor now for this build. What weapons do I want to use for this build? Obviously, in the PvE build for the Warden, we knew we're going to be using destruction stabs. That is a very stereotypical setup for any PvE DPS for Magicka. But now I'm in a PvP environment. I have a lot of choices here with Stamplar. What do I want to use? Do I want to use a 2H and a bow? Do I want to use a 2H dual wield? Do I want to use 2H sword and board? What do I want to do? I decided that because I'm going to be utilizing heavy armor, I wanted to use dual wield and 2H. Now, some you might be wondering, Dottz, why is it so important to come up with your weapons right off the bat right now? That is because I need to think about how I'm going to allocate my set bonuses on my bars. I can't pick out gear sets unless I know how many pieces I have available, how many gear slots I have available to put gear in. So I decided to go with a dual wield 2H setup, mainly because I didn't want to go 2H sword and board. Because I'm wearing heavy armor, I could afford to go more offensive with my weapon choices and really keep my pressure higher via my weapons, because my armor choice is the tankier of the two. So that is why I decided to go with dual wield and 2H as opposed to sword and board 2H. I never really considered a bow. I was always pretty much knew I wanted to do 2H and something else. The reason being is that because I'm playing in heavy armor, I need forward momentum from the 2H skill line. I absolutely need forward momentum. Forward momentum gives us our root immunity, breaks our roots, and because we do not have shuffle, I must run this. So I knew I had to run 2H in some capacity. Also, rally is momentum as an ability, giving you major brutality, and then either rally or forward momentum is just so good. It's just so good for PvP. So I knew 100% we're using a 2H. And then, like I said, I decided on the 2 one-handed weapons for more pressure. I decided on axes as a way to add more bleed pressure, more dots. Wow, who would have figured we'd like more dots? So I decided to go with the axes. I think that the bleed pressure will really play well, especially with Power of the Light. I think it's going to play very, very well, but I'll get more into, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I chose axes because I think it's going to play into how the build is going to work very, very well. Now, in terms of the gear sets themselves, how did I choose the gear sets? I looked at the crafted sets and the heavy armor gear sets and really decided what could I use and utilize for myself. And I decided that Ravager is going to be what I want to try and utilize. It gives us a line of weapon critical, a line of max health, a line of weapon damage, and then when you deal melee damage, you have an 8% chance to increase your weapon damage by 630 for 10 seconds. That is so long. That is so long. I chose this over 7th Legion because I think the 5-piece here is going to give us some more damage. Also, I looked and I think Ravager, based on my research, Ravager combos very, very well with biting jabs. So we're going to have a really high chance to proc this 5-piece. So I think that it's going to work very, very well. It's going to be a very solid set with the Stamina Templar. I like the weapon damage line, I like the max health line, and I like the weapon critical line. Just overall, a very solid set. Now, from doing my research about Templars, because basically when I'm forming a build like this, I will go throughout the internet. When I'm doing a PvP build specifically, I like to go through the internet and I like to do research. What do other people think about Stamina Templar? How do other people build their Stamina Templars? What do they do? What do they like? What do they dislike? What do they think the problems are? What do they think the issues are? So the one common thread that I found was that Stamplars have some trouble with sustain. So immediately I knew I want my second 5-piece to be a bit of a sustain set and offer me some sustain. And then after looking through all of my possible options, I decided to go with Bone Pirate. Because we get so much max stats, we get 2 lines of max stamina, and the 5th line gives us 2,000 max stamina if we have a drink buff active, and we get a line of stamina recovery, and we also get more stamina recovery from the 5-piece as well. So that gives us a huge max stat pool, gives us some great recovery, and we'll play into, I think, as a secondary set, we'll play very, very well. Going to maintain that on both the front and back bar because I knew this is my sustain. I need this on both bars. Ravager is a buff. It can be on our front bar only, and it will carry over to our back bar when we do switch. And then that kind of left me with my 2-piece Monster Helm. What do I want to use? Now, I decided that because I'm going to be using an offensive heavy armor set as well as a sustain-based medium armor set, even though it's just going to be my jewelry and my weapons, I decided that I wanted my Head and Shoulders to be maybe something a little bit more on the defensive side to keep me tanky and still offer some sustain, and obviously we're going to go with Bloodspawn. Bloodspawn is just a fantastic set for this. It gives us a line of stamina recovery, which is just absolutely awesome. It gives us 14 ultimate, 6% chance for 14 ultimate every 6 seconds, and increases our physical and spell resistance by 6450 for 6 seconds. So we're getting resistances, recovery, and ultimate regen. Not going to find a better monster set for this build and how I want to play it. So it just seemed to fit into the build very, very well. Now, I'm deciding to go all stamina enchants because I, as well, to play along with Lauren, I'm going to be playing a Nord. If I was not playing a Nord, I would say probably throw on 2 or 3 prismatics. But because I'm playing a Nord, I'm going to have the higher health pool, and I'm not going to have as much max stam as some of the other pure stam races. I decided that going with the flat max stamina, and I'm also going to be lacking a little bit in the recovery department due to not playing a pure stam race, I decided to go with the flat stamina enchants. And like I said, if I wasn't playing this, maybe I would go with some prismatics, but because I am going to be playing a Nord, I went with flat stamina. Now, in terms of my traits, I knew that I wanted to obviously run Impen. It's PvP. You always run Impen. But I decided to go with 4 pieces of Impenetrable and 3 pieces of Well-Fitted. The Well-Fitted helps play into our stamina sustain a bit. Just like on my Magic and DK build, I play with 4 pieces of Impenetrable and 4 pieces of Sturdy to help maintain our stamina through the block, which is my main my main source of mitigation. Here on the PvP build, I know that I'm going to be dodge rolling a fair bit, or a stamina build. Of course, we're going to be dodge rolling from time to time. So I at least want to have 3 pieces of Well-Fitted to help maintain my stamina pool while dodge rolling. And then, of course, like I said, I decided to go with 4 pieces of Impenetrable because, you know, without the critical resistance, you're just going to get absolutely eaten up. I also decided to go with a 5-2 setup. I did not think that the 1 piece of light and the max stats from Undaunted is going to outweigh the 2nd piece of medium for our build here. I could be wrong about that, but just based on my initial feelings, based on how the passives looked and everything, I really decided that the medium piece would benefit me much more. For jewelry, we obviously are going to be going robust jewelry, more stam, and then I'm predicting that we're going to just use 3 weapon damage glyphs for just more damage. And then if I decide I need more sustain, I can always pop one of these off for a sustain glyph. For weapons, like I said, we're going axes, Nirnhoned, infused. Infused is going to have the weapon and spell damage, just gives so much weapon and spell damage. And then we're going to go with disease for the heal debuff as well as the damage. So that is what I decided with that. Obviously, all attribute points are going to go into stamina. Now, with my skills, again, it's the same thing with my gear. I did some research, looked at some commonly used skills, also looked at the skill trees and found what do I like and what do I not like. Of course, you have to go with biting jabs. It is a staple. You got to use it. It's just your staple ability as a Stamplar. Now, being that I'm using dual wield, I knew I wanted to use an ability from dual wield, and I am using axes. So I figured, well, what if I use Blood Craze with my axes? We'll get some pretty good dot pressure going. We got Blood Craze, the Blood Craze dot, the axe dot. That's 2 different bleeds. and those will stack really well and give us some good damage. I decided to go with Blood Craze for the healing. This is PvP. More healing is always a good thing. So that is why I decided Blood Craze over Redding Slashes. Of course, Binding Javelin is going to be our stun. I looked at other possible stuns, and they just did not feel as good as I wanted. I looked at Focus Charge, but Focus Charge does not have a Stamina Morph, and that's a pretty hefty magic cost. Binding Javelin does have a Stamina Morph, and it stuns the enemy for a pretty long duration, so that is what I wanted to do that. And it has a knockback. I just thought that it'd be a pretty solid CC ability. Like I said, I liked it more than Focus Charge. This actually deals physical damage, while this just deals magic damage. So I feel like Binding Javelin is just going to be much better for the kit itself. And then Power of the Light, of course, where you deal summon an expanding beam of pure sunlight to doom an enemy, copying all damage taken for 6 seconds and releasing 18% of it as additional physical damage to them. They also get Minor Fracture and Minor Breach, reducing their physical and spell resistance by 1320 for 6 seconds. This is also a stamina ability. So I figured that with Power of the Light, between all of the dot pressure I have from, and this is what I was referring to before with the axes, I have Axe Dot, Blood Craze, and then me just dealing damage to my opponent. I am going to stack up a good bit of damage on my opponent that even if they're managing to heal through it, that damage is stacking and is going to be released as one big burst with Power of the Light. So that is why the main reason I decided to use axes was to help buff up the Power of the Light damage and how much damage it's able to copy, because all of that little damage stacks up. It stacks up, and then when the Power of the Light burst procs, it's going to deal a lot of damage. Resolving Vigor, I want to have a heal in my front bar. This is also a group heal. My weapon damage, I believe, is going to be the highest on my front bar. I could be wrong. Based on how the passes are, I actually might be wrong about that. I just wanted to heal on my front bar, just so that if I got caught on my front bar, I wouldn't be just a sitting duck, and I'll be able to stay up, maintain my front bar a bit longer if I have Vigor up here. I may move this to my back bar eventually, but at a first thought, I thought it would be a good idea to have this on my front bar. And then I went, this is why, yes, my weapon damage is my highest on my front bar, because I'm going with Flawless Dawnbreaker. That'll give me an additional 5% weapon damage, so yes, that is why I went with Resolving Vigor on the front bar, because it will heal the highest, because my weapon damage is highest here. I went with Flawless due to the fact that I have a stun with Binding Javelin, so I can afford to go with the higher weapon damage via Flawless Dawnbreaker. If I was not running Javelin, I would run the other morph for the stun, but you only need one hard CC in the kit. I don't need multiple different hard CCs. This is plenty, just only one. You generally don't want to run multiple, so that is why I ended up choosing Flawless Dawnbreaker. And then, like I said, I explained forward momentum earlier. I went with Stampede because I need a gap closer, and I want a snare. This is going to add a great snare. They are nerfing gap closer damage next patch as well, so I don't want to rely on a gap closer for some damage. So I decided to go with a snare choice. I went with Repentance for the resource sustain. Very simple. Resource sustain. That's why I chose to go with Repentance. When you're making PvP builds, you always need to take your sustain into account, especially if you're trying to play outnumbered against multiple opponents or even duel. You really dueling actually damage is a little bit more important than sustain. But playing in open world outnumbered, you need to make sure that you have the sustain to keep your resources up while you're fighting multiple people. So Repentance just seemed like, after looking through all of the Templar trees, Repentance seemed like a very obvious choice for my resource maintenance. So that is why I chose to go with Repentance. And then Extended Ritual, it's a cleanse, 5 harmful effects. It's what makes the Templar so great. And obviously, it's something I chose to use because cleansing 5 harmful effects and giving you a nice little heal is awesome, and it gives a synergy to your party. Restoring Focus gives us Minor Vitality, Minor Protection, increasing our healing received by 8% and reduces damage taken by 8%. Awesome ability here. And then we get Major Resolve and Major Ward, giving us more resistances. So if we could kind of play around our Restoring Focus, like we could charge to someone, lay down a Restoring Focus, switch, if we could play around our Restoring Focus, we can really, really keep ourselves tanked up and make sure that we are not taking a lot of damage. So it's just a really, really good, and it's a very cheap cost, lasts for a good bit of time. So I wanted, like I said, it seemed like a really, really good ability to bring some more buffs to the table. I didn't have any source of major resolve or major ward, so I wanted to bring Restoring Focus to just give us that source. And then I decided to go with Remembrance for my back bar ult. Most of the time I'm going to be using Dawnbreaker, but the reason I decided to go for Remembrance is because I like to have an offensive ult normally and a defensive ult, or at the very like for my DK, I have an offensive ult and an AoE ult. But for the Templar, I felt it was best to run a defensive ult on the back bar, especially looking through my other ult choices. I didn't feel that any of the other ult choices really offered anything that I wouldn't use them over Dawnbreaker, you know? Like, I was looking at the ult choices like, you know, Adrix Spear, I looked at Radial Sweep and the Morphs, and I was like, would I really ever use that over Dawnbreaker in a situation? Like, I feel like I'm going to end up using Dawnbreaker more than I'm going to use any of the Morphs of Radial Sweep. So I decided that Remembrance, being that you cannot bash it, would be a really good thing to offer me and a team, because you remember, ultimate scale with your highest resource. So this is going to be a big heal. It's going to heal me, my party, and grant major protection, reducing your damage taken by 30%. And you can't be CC'd, so you're being healed. You and your party are being healed. Cost the same as Dawnbreaker. If you're in a pinch and you really need some healing, pop off a Remembrance. It seemed like for the build that it was very appropriate for the back bar ultimate. Now, some of you might be sitting here wondering, Dottz, that's great and all. You just explained your abilities. How the hell am I supposed to know what abilities to use? How am I supposed to know what abilities are good? How am I supposed to know what is going to be decent? Research. You, especially if you've never played a class before, you need to do research. That's just the way it is. If you're trying to Theorycraft a build and you've never played a class before, you can't expect to just look at everything and go, oh yeah, I know exactly how this is going to work, because frankly, you don't. Like, you don't. Even if you have a good understanding of the game and the mechanics behind it, like I said, things and how they are on paper versus how they are out in the world can really be a lot different. So when you're initially Theorycrafting something, I like to look at what other people are doing and see the common threads between what a lot of other players are doing. Some players might have an opinion on one ability, another player might have the contradictory opinion on it, and I look at what other players are doing, what other players are using, and what they think about certain things, and then I sit down here on ESO Skills, I look through all of the different skills and think about what I'm trying to accomplish and I want to do, and I just sit here and basically play like with a puzzle. I'll just drag abilities onto and off of these bars here until I feel like it's in a solid spot. So I think about all of the other stuff that those other players said, the experiences that they described, and what they decided was best for their character. I take that stuff into consideration while forming my own opinions looking at the other skills. So I kind of use what other people did and how they decided to build their characters to kind of fuel and kind of back up. Like when you have that kind of monologue in your head where you talk to yourself about, well, what about this ability? I don't know if it's that good. Well, what about this one? That one kind of sucks. You can kind of have that debate within yourself and have the opinions of other players kind of sitting in the background going, yeah, that guy's right. No, that guy's right. If that makes sense. That's at least how I like to go about it and how I like to do it. That's just how I found has worked best for me. I look at a wide variety of stuff, take in a lot of freaking information, and then just sit down with this calculator. And I like to just think about what I want to do and what's going to be the best for me, and how I think I'm going to play and how I think I'm going to do it. And of course, this may change. Once I start playing and get out there, this may change. But this is just my initial thoughts, my initial theory crafting, and how I think the build's going to work for me. So that is it for skills. For buff food, or in this case buff drink, because I'm running Bone Pirate, I'm thinking I gotta run a drink. So Dubious Cameron Throne, which is the stamina equivalent to the Witchmother's Potent Brew. Max health, stamina, stam recovery, just too good to pass up. We were going Warrior for our Mundus, just due to the fact that it is the highest parsing Mundus. And then for our races, we have a lot of choices. Redguard, Orc, Bosmer, or Nord. I'm playing Nord. That is why I tailored a lot of my champion points and some of my enchants around it. Obviously, Redguard would be, or Orc or Bosmer would be more Abyss, but I decided to go Nord just because. And with the potions, I decided that a good way to help my stam sustain would be to use unstoppable / immovability potions, whatever you want to call them. And I believe there is a potion that grants unstoppable stamina recovery and speed. I heard a couple different people whose stuff I was watching and whose builds I was reading. They talked about, I believe this is the potion that they talked about. And after looking at all my different potion options, I really do think this is the best one to just give us, that Sonic go, more stamina recovery, and then unstoppable to further help our stamina sustain. It just seemed like too good of a potion to pass up. And then again, when I'm looking at passives, I'm going to probably use all my class passives. I'm going to use my heavy armor passives. I'm going to use all of my non-5-piece requiring medium armor passives, all of my dual wield passives, my two-handed passives, all my Fighters Guild passives, Undaunted, Racial, Medicinal Use from Alchemy, Assault, and Support. So you just want to get your passives from your relevant skill lines. And then in terms of CP, how I did my CP, this red CP is pretty much what I use for all my characters. I always go 56 into Ironclad, 54 into Resistant, 56 into Thick Skinned, 32 into Hardy, and 32 into LE Defender. Through my testing and my playing, that is the red combination that works best for me while using 4 pieces of Imped. That is just what I'd like. In terms of my green trees, I decided to go pretty heavy into Mooncalf, being that I'm playing a Nord, so I went 75 into Mooncalf. I did hear a lot that Stamplars do heavy attack a fair bit, so I decided to pump up Tenacity up to 43 points. I also knew that because I'm not using a sword and board, I probably will not be blocking all that much, so I did not put any points into Shadow Ward and instead put 56 points into Tumbling to help with my dodge rolling, because dodge rolling is just so expensive. And then, of course, I went 56 points into Warlord to help with my CC breaking. And then in terms of the blue tree, the one that everyone likes to ask and learn about, when I am going into a class that I know nothing about for PvP, I like to spread my CP out a bit. I like to kind of keep it even across the board, and I can kind of fine-tune and test things as they go along. So I went 44 points into Thaumaturge because biting jabs counts as a dot, so Thaumaturge is going to pump up biting jabs. I went 49 into Mighty, 40 into Precise Strikes, 41 into Piercing, and 56 into Master at Arms. Master at Arms is a really good tree. I don't think for Stamplar you need to go any higher than 56, at least from what I've seen a lot of other people do. So I decided to just cap it out at 56. Mighty is the equivalent to Elemental Expert, so I figured 49 would be an appropriate amount to cap it out at. Because I am going to be in heavy armor, I need to pump up my pen, so I went 41 points into Piercing, and then I had 40 points left over, so I put them into Precise Strikes to help with any crits that I do. And that, guys, is how I Theorycraft. That is the thought process that I use when I sit down and Theorycraft builds. I really just look through the ability trees on ESO skills. I do research to see what others are doing. I start off with a point like, do I want to use heavy armor? Do I want to use medium armor? What ability do I really know I want to use? And I use that as a springboard point. You need to pick somewhere in your build that's gonna act as a springboard for the rest of your build. You can't just go, I'm gonna make a build and not have a point to start at. You need somewhere to start so that you can build the rest of the build around it. You know what I'm saying? So give yourself that springboard point. Give yourself a place to jump off from and really run with it. But I hope this podcast, this video, I hope it made sense. A lot of stuff with Theorycrafting it's very personal. A lot of it goes on inside your head, and me showing you how I Theorycraft, it's just kind of like letting you into my mind and showing you what I think about and what goes on when I personally Theorycraft my own characters. And the way you Theorycraft may not be the same way I Theorycraft. The way you arrive at your build decisions is probably not going to be the same way I arrive at mine. But this is what I do. This is how I go about it. I've tried a lot of different ways to really think about things and how I look at stuff. But recently, these methods have been what's been working for me. And guys, keep in mind, theory crafting takes practice. You're not going to be an expert theory crafter in a day or a week or a month. I'm still not even an expert theory crafter. I'm considerably better than I have been previously, but I still have a lot of improvement and a lot of places that I need to get better at, a lot of things that I need to improve on. And the only way to get better at it, the only way to improve about it, is to practice, to theory craft yourself, to try your own builds, and spend the gold in giving them a try. It's an expensive hobby, but it's very fun, it's very rewarding, and I enjoy it a lot. It's one of the great things about ESO. It's one of the things I love about the game, and I really hope that this video helped at least one person out there with their theory crafting, and that this kind of gave you a little window into what I'm doing. I hope it did not seem like I was just going over these two builds. I think that while I was going through them, because I know this video is really long, it's 55 minutes. People have been wanting a long podcast, so here you go, long podcast. I hope that I explained my thought process behind the choices well enough. Like I said, a lot of this stuff does come from knowledge over time. Like, oh, but Dottz, how'd you know Warrior was the highest parsing Mundus? I know. I've seen other tests done on it. I've done tests on it. I know Warrior is the highest parsing Mundus. Like, it's stuff like that. Like, that stuff's, a lot of that's going to come with time, with practice. Like, a lot of the stuff that I explained and a lot of my thought processes, some of you guys might be going, well, how'd you arrive at that? How did you arrive at, you know, that conclusion? And it was, a lot of it comes with practice. Really, theory crafting is a very, very, very hands-on learning activity. So as long as you go into theory crafting willing to learn and willing to fail, you will eventually find success. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of the Fireside Chat podcast. I understand this was not as podcasty as other episodes, and that this is kind of more like a video. I still hope that you all enjoyed it. I still hope that you liked it. It's a bit of a different format than the other ones. So I just really hope that everybody liked it. And if you did, please leave a thumbs up on the video. I hope that I did the request of theory crafting justice for you all. And if you guys like this, if you guys like the content you're seeing here on the Dottz Gaming YouTube channel, I'd appreciate if you hit that sub button, as well as hit the little bell next to it to keep notifications on. Thank you guys so much for watching. Good luck out there theory crafting your builds. If you have any questions, leave a comment below, and I will see you all very, very soon.